What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review for you. And this time we're going to get a little bit proggy and a little bit spacey because we are going to go over the latest offering from Exist, Hijacking the Zeitgeist. This also comes out on the 12th of April on Prosthetic Records. This band formed somewhere around 2010. It's kind of hard to look up information on this band because for some odd reason, they're not on the archives, even though I think they have all the qualifications to be on the archives.
I 100% believe they have all the qualifications to be on the archives, and it's stupid that they're not.
Yeah.
The archives get me sometimes. The bands that should be on there are on there, and bands that shouldn't be on there are on there, and I don't know. Pisses me off.
Just a little consistency, that's all I'm asking. Anyway, they formed somewhere around 2010 in Baltimore, Maryland. This is their third album so far. I picked up their debut album, So True, So Bound, on a recommendation from Jeff from Gas Mask and Hand Grenades. He talked this band up, and I checked out the album and was like, man, Jeff was right. I said that on camera, Jeff. You get this moment. And I went out and found their follow-up album, Egoista, and I was a huge fan of that. In fact, I think it improved on stuff on the debut, so I was really hyped to check this one out. And for those that don't know, this is progressive metal, progressive death metal, tech death, maybe in some moments. It's progressive metal at its core. I guess that's probably the most basic way to go about it. It is fronted and helmed by one Max Phelps, who has been surrounding himself with insanely talented musicians, most likely because he's an insanely talented musician himself. He also plays live in Cynic. He also plays live in Death to All. He is playing the role of Chuck on stage, which is lofty as hell. And he also has his project W.A.I.T, or We Are in Transit, which also features members from this band. So this guy is very busy, and pretty much everything he does has a really interesting proggy flair. And early on in this band's existence, I would say that there was a lot of Cynic worship. And, I'm all for that just because Cynic is absolutely awesome. Lots of jazz fusion, polyrhythms, wildly technical songs that are just very fluid and just kind of strange and atmospheric. And I think that style really peaked on Egoista. Like, that is just a lush, crazy, technical, but just beautiful album.
That's a great record. I've jammed that record many times. I love it. I'm a big fan of this band already, so knowing that and getting into this, I actually couldn't wait to listen to this record. It's the last one that we've done for the day, and I've been pretty stoked on this since knowing it was coming out. Now, Egoista being the last record I listened to by this band, I had certain expectations coming into this anyway. I knew it was going to be a pretty damn good record. My assumption is that they were going to expound on the last record and bring it to this one, but this record is notably different. And it's not in a bad way at all. This is still killer, but it is very different.
One thing I noticed kind of throughout the album, though, it does make its appearances, but just not nearly as much. I think the Cynic sort of vibes have kind of been pulled back. And overall, I feel like this album is a little bit more on the aggressive side compared to Egoista. The opening two tracks, Blue Light Infinite and Thief of Joy, are really heavy. Like, super heavy, lots of polyrhythms, big heavy chugs. You have more prominent growled vocals. You do get some clean singing in there, but when the singing comes up, me, kind of, again, listening to Egoista before this, I was expecting more of the Cynic-esque vocoder vocals. They're actually more straightforward. Like, they're definitely harmonized, but they don't have that spacey effect. And honestly, this album doesn't have, like, that big cosmic sound, but even looking at the artwork, this feels more grounded in a subject matter, like people being consumed by technology. So this is, I don't know, maybe a little bit more aggressive sounding, just because there's a lot of frustration with it, because that's what I got on these first two tracks, like heavy Meshuggah vibes.
Oh, yeah. Actually, in these first couple songs, this is what I wish Periphery's vocalist sounded like. Because there is a flavor on this record, and instead of it being that Cynic vibe, it's got more of a djent vibe. And me personally, when djent first became a thing and introduced itself onto the market, that was a huge time for me. I was a gigantic djent fan. And these first couple songs, yeah, remind me of Meshuggah. Definitely some circles as far as the vocals are concerned. And there are cleaner moments in these songs that are more cynic-y, but they're mostly in the bridges.
Yeah, generally they save those more like jazz fusion-esque moments for bridges or lead sections, like Thief of Joy, A Path to Nowhere, and the last track, Window to the All, which I thought of Window to the Wall when I saw that. I was like, no, that's totally...
Till the sweat drips down.
Nope, we're not finishing
We're not
that.
doing that.
This is progressive metal. We're far too cultured to be talking about bass level things like that.
Yes.
We're going to get back to talking about polyrhythms and technical play and,
Okay.
all that stuff. But no, that is seriously what I thought of first. And another thing that I feel is very different about this one compared to Egoista, because I'm inevitably going to keep comparing it to the last one because that album had a huge impact on me. The songs are way more condensed. There's not a song on here over 10 minutes. In fact, most of them around the 5 to 4.5 minute mark.
4.5, 5 minutes mark. I mean, the last track was kind of long. The title track is kind of lengthy. But yeah, they're pretty like short and condensed and to the point.
One could say they were focused.
Oh.
I know. I have to make at least one cynic joke in there. But the overall tone of this, for the most part, is way more aggressive. Like, there's a lot of bending, lurching, heavy riffs. And in terms of, like, the more spacey, atmospheric stuff, it is generally, I think, more focused on the song Funeral Toll, which is the one that probably sounds the most like Cynic.
Yeah.
It's more atmospheric. There's more clean playing. And while it is rhythmically very challenging, because all the rhythms on here are absolutely nuts, like the rhythm section of this band is
oh my God.
insanely good.
Oh my God.
But it's very like light and airy, and even though it has like some heavier sections, like the whole vibe of it is like, I don't know, like watching sunlight shimmering on a pond. It's just kind of just open and
very airy, very lush.
Yeah.
Like, this is where the last record comes into play, I think, as far as sound is concerned, because this track, Funeral Toll, is definitely more proggy, I think, than everything else. A lot of huge cynic vibes. I got a lot of early Textures vibes, like Drawing Circles and Dualism, that era of Textures, because the vocals remind me a lot of that. Like, even the transitions remind me a lot of that, too.
I think this album is vocally probably a little bit more dynamic. There are two vocalists, Max and I forget the bassist's name, but
Sorry.
You're really good at bass, and honestly, I like the vocal flourishes. Like, there's some really good vocal harmonies in the clean sections, and they have slightly different growls. You can kind of pick them up, and there's like kind of like a good give and take in some of the songs. A Path to Nowhere in particular has some really good vocal hooks. I really like the chorus hook in particular, and the fact that it's like one of the more straightforward songs.
The chorus is, at least, yes.
It's a simple strummed riff, or at least simple in comparison to every other technical crazy thing they're doing on here. But I kind of like that it is based on like a hook that repeats a lot, because there's some songs in here that get wildly technical as hell, like 1 Degree Removed from Human.
Oh.
Man, that song has some absolutely bonkers transitions. There's strings at the end of it. There's a cool bass lead on it. There's some really interesting dynamic shifts going from like quiet, muted, more introspective to just loud and riffy and, again, just bonkers technical play.
Oh, yeah. Actually, some of the more intricate riffing is on A Path to Nowhere. The opening, that syncopated riff between the drums and the guitars, reminded me a lot of Blotted Science. Like, that level of crazy. And the riffing throughout that song, except for, again, the clean, pretty bridge, the cynic-y kind of exvious vibe that has, most of the riffs in that song are incredibly intricate and very well done.
I also got like a lot of Ihsahn's solo work on here, like just strange shifts, and again, like the vocal melodies are, I don't know, kind of unique. Like they feel like they're a little off kilter, like they're not going for a standard vocal hook, like a big rock hook. Like it's kind of wispy, and the vocal melodies kind of float around kind of oddly. But it works with this album just because, tonally it's all over the place in terms of going from like just viciously heavy. Like there's some disgusting breakdowns on here that are much heavier than I was actually expecting. I mean, pretty damn heavy for a band that isn't on the archives.
Right.
Again.
Yeah, the breakdown in the title track, Hijacking the Zeitgeist, is one of the coolest things I've heard in a long time. It's got this awesome stutter groove to it that, like, you try to bang your head, but then you end up doing like the vomiting cat.
Is that what that move's called?
Yep, that's what I'm calling it from now on, the vomiting cat groove. But yeah, it's got a really sweet stuttered pattern to it, and the breakdown is violently heavy.
And again, when they get into some of these like big djenty riffs, there's frequently bends and slides on them, and kind of giving the riffs like a lurching effect. And a lot of big moody shifts. Like again, you go from like bright and introspective to just dark and just rabid and very angry. This album is really solid at kind of like blending a little bit of everything they've done so far, but I will say I do think that this album gets a little bit close to W.A.I.T, their other project. There's definitely a bigger focus on djenty, heavy riffs on this one, more so than at least, Egoista, which, djent with me, like, I like it. Like, most of my djent listing consists of, I still like Animals as Leaders, and of course Meshuggah, because it's Meshuggah. But for me, when it comes down to those riffs, like, the syncopation is always cool. I like that those are used as like the heavier sections on here for the most part. They're not bad. Sometimes they do kind of feel like, all right, yeah, I probably heard this on, a Circles album or a Textures album.
Yep.
Not really a complaint, but, djent riffs are kind of hard to make stand out. But this band, in terms of the rhythms, in terms of those, like, stuttering kicks and those cool polyrhythms.
Ghost notes on the snare. And
when they get outside of the djent chugging and start building melodies and just, like, the more intricate technical riffs, the frequent use of, like, atmospheric leads, kind of giving it that lush effect, and then even, like, kind of a dark haunting effect. Like, when they get away from just the chugging, I think that kind of opens up that spacey atmosphere that I think this album is missing a little bit more, but at the same time, it ups the aggression. So props to them for making like 3 different albums so far. Like, that's tough.
Yeah, and the spacey moments are still there. They're just peppered in. They're used more as a seasoning. Like I said, a lot of them occur during the bridges or leading up to the leads. Like that transition right between the bridge and the lead is very spacey. Or even the end of the last track, Window to the All, that has a very spacey ending to it. And it's actually a very pretty song for the most part.
As far as any negatives on here, I mean, the djent thing is kind of a negative, but it's kind of not, because it is really well executed. And again, there's more intricacies in their riffs than, say a lot of like the standard djent bands out there. Like, I don't think they're very comparable. Plus, this band does a lot of other cool things. I do think the production is really compressed, but I kind of understand that with the style, like, like more organic production, it doesn't necessarily work as well, even though I think, if they had like the production of like a Cynic album, it might still really work. But again, that's not like a deal breaker on here. Like, most of this, I'm just more engaged by the music itself. And while I like that they kind of got maybe a little bit out of Cynic's shadow, I kind of miss it though, because again, inevitably I was going to compare this one to the last one, because the last one, I mean, had a huge impact on me. Like, I've gone back and jammed that multiple times.
That's a vibe.
This one I'll definitely come back to, but for different reasons. Like, this one, again, has a more angry, I guess, like frustrated vibe,
kind of,
especially at first. And it does have like a really cool flow in terms of like the heavier stuff is definitely located more towards the front of the album, and it starts kind of opening up as it goes on. But overall, I think this is a really solid album. So I'm going to go ahead and give this 4 stars. It's a pretty strong 4. It could grow to 4.5. I don't think it'll go down, but I like what this band is doing. But I will say I liked the last one a bit more. That one just kind of spoke to me in terms of like, what I really like in prog metal like this. Like, I like the more jazz fusion sections and the big spacey vibes. And I even kind of miss the vocoder vocals a little bit. Like, I want robots and aliens to talk to me about cosmic things my stupid human brain couldn't possibly understand. This one feels more grounded in reality, which, again, the album cover definitely speaks to a definite issue with people in terms of just being sucked in by their phones and such. But part of my appeal for this band was like kind of the escapism, like just being more strange and nebulous at times. But overall, I mean, if you're a big fan, again, of like Cynic, Isan for damn sure too, Animals as Leaders, God, I'm trying to think of other ones. I mean, a lot of djent bands, like if you like W.A.I.T as well, you will probably like this one.
I adore W.A.I.T.
Stuff like that, like very polyrhythmic, very angular, kind of twisted, progressive metal. Definitely check this out. And yeah, I'll probably end up following Max wherever he goes in terms of his career because this dude's just a caliber player.
Well, if you haven't guessed by now, I really adored this album. It's a 4.5 for me. Once again, this speaks to a younger me. Like I said earlier, when I got into djent, I got in pretty hardcore. But this is like a mixture of all the best bands to do it. This is very tight and very well put together. I love polyrhythms, and I love down-tuned angular riffs, and there's a bunch of that going on in here. Every time they do a lead, I love the fact that it is very fusion-y and jazzy. I'm a huge Exvius fan, and a lot of the lead work in here reminds me of both Cynic and Exvius, which are pretty akin to each other anyway. There wasn't a single song that I wasn't bobbing my head on, and for me, again, it just brought back a lot of memories to when I got into this style of music, and even the bands that I would compare this to, I think that Exist kind of did it a little bit better in most sections than even the bands I really enjoy. Again, there wasn't a single song I didn't like. If you're a big fan of things like Meshuggah, Fell Silent, Animals as Leaders, Entheos, Circles, Textures, some Tesseract in their more lush moments, Bleeding Skies, W.A.I.T, which is obviously very close to this anyway. The Contortionist, I get a lot of language vibes from this too. If you're a fan of any and all of that, check this out. And if you've heard Exist before, this is a really great offering from them. I'm really impressed by this. I will definitely jam this again because it's after midnight, which means it's now available on Spotify, which means I'm going to jam it on the way home. So, hell yeah. Pick this up. I loved it.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, up in the bottom right-hand corner of our banner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The older ones are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And as always, thank you guys. Thank you for again tuning in and watching us and talking to us and all the things that you guys do to make Thralls of Metal a whole lot bigger than what we ever thought it would be. The reason that we sit down here in this basement for 10 hours at a time and do these reviews is all because of you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you to every one of you.
Yeah, you guys are absolutely awesome. Tons of content coming, and I really hope you guys are finding some cool new jams through these videos. Yeah. That's always been one of my favorite things, and one of my big goals for this channel is to just introduce people to a lot of music. But yeah, tons of stuff on the way, and I'm just going to leave it with another big thank you because you guys are absolutely awesome, and we will catch you later.